Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Musical Innertube. I am Don Rooney.
And I'm John Timpane. You know, Don's had quite a career in radio and television, where he's been an air personality, a news anchor, even a TV weatherman.
And John's been a college professor. He's written several books, and he's been an editor and features writer at the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper.
We first teamed up for a radio show in college. On one show, we introduced a soothing musical interlude.
But we stumbled, and it came out Musical Innertube.
And that became the name for this podcast, where we talk with interesting people about their interesting lives.
Our guest today is Chick Russell. Chick is a friend of mine from back in college days, and he's been doing a lot since then, not only growing in width and wisdom, but also in doing some very, very interesting work. How you doing, Chick?
I'm doing great, Don. Great to be with you.
Yeah, and it's nice to be able to finally sit down and say, Chick, what the hell is it that you do?
Well, Don, it's kind of based on what I was studying with you back in college, kind of film and television production. And so that was my dream, to go create the great movie and write the great screenplay. And lo and behold, I spent a couple years doing industrials, which is basically video and for companies, that kind of thing. And then finally, I got a call from a friend of mine who was working at Walt Disney Imagineering. And he said they were looking for some people to help. And I said, what is Walt Disney Imagineering? He explained to me it's the theme park design division of the Disney company, doing all the theme parks. And I go, great, never heard of it. I'll come in and take a look. And lo and behold, I found out that they do a lot of media production at the theme parks. If you think about it for a minute, when you go on a ride, you see film you're riding by, or you're putting on VR goggles. Anyway, There's a whole world of media in the theme park world. And so I used everything I learned with you in college about script writing and doing storyboards and design and producing and all those kinds of things, but applied it into a completely different realm of the media world, and that's the theme park world.
Yeah, and I should say that Chick and I both were film majors at Loyola, and even though I was a film major, I went into radio, so I kind of threw that all away, while Chick used it to his advantage. Now, when you go into a theme park and go on one of these rides, I wanted to say initially thrill ride, but it's not a thrill ride. That would be a roller coaster. How do you describe the ride at a theme park that you work on?
Well, that's a very good point, because theme park attractions really do encompass quite a few different kinds of things. The first thing that people think about when they think of theme park is a thrill ride, which, Six Flags, the giant iron rides, which are very fun and very thrilling, but they tend not to have a lot of story involved with them, except just going fast and getting scared and hopefully not hurling while you're doing that. But the rides I became more involved with at Disney and Universal were the ones that we call dark rides. These are rides that take place inside buildings and have pretty elaborate theatrical sets you're riding past. And as I mentioned before, now have quite elaborate medium projection systems that can actually, transport you anywhere using media. So that's what we call it. We call it immersive dark rides that have these more sophisticated experiences.
Now, tell me some of the rides that you worked on when you were a Disney Imagineer.
Sure. So I was in a division of Walt Disney Imagineering that was called Concept Development, which is really fun, as you can imagine. Basically, the idea was there was probably half a dozen or so writers and concept people, maybe a dozen. And our job really was to develop new attractions and new theme parks. So basically, we'd get a call and we'd say, we need a new theme park idea. And they would tell us where it's going, and then we would start thinking about what it could be. So a case in point was a call we got from our Japanese partners, Oriental Land Company. They wanted a new theme park to go next to their existing theme park in Tokyo, where they have a Magic Kingdom park already. And we tried to suggest that they put in a Japanese version of Epcot, or a Japanese version of a studio tour theme park, which Disney had both of those. And they weren't interested. They said, we want a brand new theme park you've never done before for Japan? We said, well, that'll be kind of expensive because we have to start from scratch and design that. And they said, well, we don't care. We just want something new and unique for Japan. So we came up, we got in a room, we do what's called a brainstorming session, basically, where a bunch of writers sit around and come up with ideas. We pin all the ideas on the board. And at the end of the day, we have about 500 kind of really bad ideas. But, but the next phase is we start weeding through and try to find the best ideas of those 500 bad ideas. And believe it or not, we find these little nuggets. And then what happens is kind of interesting is a couple so-so ideas that we find, we start connecting with other so-so ideas, and they start to kind of bloom into something that could be interesting. And so one of the ideas we had was a theme park based on water, but not a water park, but a theme park based on rivers and oceans around the world. And so the Disney company kind of liked that idea. We pitched it to our partners in Japan. They kind of liked the idea, and then we proceeded to come up with kind of seven seas instead of seven lands of what this could be. And one was an adventure river kind of place, kind of anchored by Indiana Jones. Another was kind of an Arabian idea that was centered around the Sinbad ride. And then we had others about the future, and we had others about kind of a adventure island, kind of based on the books of Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Journey to the Center of the Earth. And then we had like an American waterfront, which is kind of New York at the turn of the century, the 1900 turn of the century. And then finally, a kind of a European Italian land called Mediterranean Harbor that actually had gondolas in it and was beautifully themed to look like Italy. And we created a big kind of river to go around the whole place that took the place of the train that Disneyland has. It was a boat ride that would take you from land to land. So anyway, that's kind of how that whole process took place.
You've just given us this lovely arc of the creative process, and I'm wondering if there's any of the steps that are harder than any of the others. Is there one part of all that that's really tough?
The part that's really tough is the part I didn't talk about, and that's the part of actually getting because it's the part of getting it all built. So coming up with the ideas and pitching something. Because I learned, because I'm a genius, thanks to Don Rooney, I can come up with all kinds of ideas anytime I want, and and pitch them to just about anybody. But what I found out working in the theme park world when I began working there is that there's a huge difference from making a film or making a TV show, which is all video, all digital, and all pretty much, it happens pretty quick. The theme park world is once you have a script or have a story for the whole place and develop what the lands are and what the attraction stories are, then there's this whole other system that kicks into gear, which is called making it real and making it last for decades, really. And that's the part I didn't really learn in school because I was a film and TV major. I learned how to make film and video. I didn't learn how to make buildings that had shows in them and learn how to do engineer ride systems that go inside or even physical special effects that happen to you on the ride. So there's all these other things, and that's really the hard part when it comes to theme park is you take your written material and your storyboards and then you say, okay, now we have to figure out what the ride system is. We have to figure out how that gets engineered. We have to figure out how big that is and where do the projection screens go and where do the special effects go. And then you say, okay, great. Now we know that. Now, how do we build a building around all that so there's not a column in the middle of it? And how big is that building? And all the things that go with that. So that's really the complicated part. And that's why it takes usually about 5 years from start to finish, or in the case of Universal Beijing that I worked on, it took them 10 years because then you add, of course, onto it all the permitting and the governmental approvals and all the infrastructure that's needed for the parking and for the power and for the all the other things that you need to build, which is essentially a small city.
You're saying basically that you learned your architecture and electronics degrees, literally on the job.
In a sense, that's correct. Although I didn't really learn it in detail, but I had to become familiar with all kinds of things that I never thought I would have to. And also things like operational aspects of getting people in and out of the building, as many people as you efficiently can, because the whole idea, as you know from standing in lines at theme parks, you're constantly trying to get as many people through as fast as possible. So there's a whole another science of how do you design how many people can go on the ride and how fast can they get on and how fast can they get through the ride and how fast they can get off. It's often why you feel sometimes a little disappointed that the ride was so short. It's short because they're trying to get all the people behind you on the ride as well. So that they call that, just kind of a human engineering aspect of a theme park.
Two of the projects that you've mentioned, one was in Tokyo
Mhm.
and one was in Beijing.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if there are cultural
Yeah.
conversations that you have
Yeah.
to make sure that all of your ideas have to be translated or perhaps adjusted.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Right now, I have my own company called Chick Russell and Company that kind of specializes in designing theme parks and attractions and even museum exhibits for different companies. And that's one of the things that's happened to me. Almost all of my work is overseas right now, just because of the pandemic and for whatever reason, we have kind of a mature theme park um, network in this country, but other countries are trying to build theirs up. So that's where the work is. But that's one thing I learned when I did my first international project, and that was the Tokyo Disney Sea project. It's what you do is you form a collaborative arrangement with whoever you're building these parks with, and you let them know that you really need their help to review what you're doing and to get the sensibilities of whatever country you're working in is. And oftentimes they'll just say, no, we don't want you to be culturally sensitive. We just want an American theme park. And so you kind of go back and forth, and it's surprising how often this was the case, at least for the last 10 years, although it's starting to change a little bit now, how much they really admire and wanted the kind of a foreign experience as opposed to a domestic experience. But there's still things you have to learn, like in Japan, um, uh, pretty much like in England, everything is kind of reversed in terms of the driving and also the way people walk past each other. So they pass you on the right. And so you have to think about all those things as you're figuring out the way you enter into a ride or into a building as you come out. So there are those things. And then also the restaurant mix, you would think just, well, just put a couple hamburger and hot dog spots and you're done. Well, that doesn't work. Disney found that out the hard way when they did Euro Disney. They said, there'll be no wine and we'll have just regular, Disney type food. And the French said, no, that's not going to work for us. We will have wine and we will have nice food. And finally, Disney agreed to that. So those are some of the things you have to deal with.
When you're doing a specific ride in a place where there's already been rides,
Mm-hmm.
how do you make it fit in with everything else that's already in the park?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. The best way to do it is the way we did the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. What we did there was we just tore down an old section of Islands of Adventure in Orlando, and we built a whole new land. The beauty of the land, of course, is that it immerses you in an environment. In that case, it was Hogsmeade, the little village that's in the books and in the movies. And so once you walk through the front gate, you can't see the rest of the Universal theme park. All you see are the little northern English or Scottish village you're in, and there's snow on the roof, which kind of works, except when it's about 100 degrees and 90% humidity in Orlando. But it's really great on a cool, drizzly day in Orlando. So that's the secret of adding a new attraction. Whenever you can, try to put a land around it so the ride feels great. In the case of Transformers, which is in the park next to that, in Orlando at Universal, that building was plopped right down in the middle of that theme park, which is the Universal Studios Orlando. But it's okay in that case because that theme park has a theme that's basically a backlot for a studio, and so there's all kinds of eclectic buildings next to each other. In fact, right across the street from this very kind of high-tech military complex building for Transformers is a New York street from the turn of the century. But you buy it because that's the idea for a theme park, or I should say, a studio theme park.
Now, when you get into a situation where you're doing a Harry Potter, a Transformers,
Mhm.
or something specific at Disney that relates to a particular Disney product, I'm assuming that you have to sit down and watch hours and hours of Harry Potter or
Yeah,
Transformers to get yourself used to this.
you have to do that. Another project I worked on was the Nintendo Koopas Challenge video
Mm.
game ride at Universal Japan. This is in the new Super Nintendo World land there. I wasn't a big Mario Kart game player, and so I had to play the game, do research, understand the characters, understand the gameplay, understand all the different elements of that game, so I could write a script that would really immerse you in the Mario Kart world. And with that ride, it was pretty fun because the other thing we do often with these rides is we keep trying to top the other rides that are out there. So in that case, my boss decided that we would use augmented reality. That ride just opened a couple months ago. It was the first time AR had ever been used on a theme park ride, and it's pretty cool. You put these clear glasses on. These clear lenses have little projectors in them, and they can project, in that case, for that ride, things like turtle shells that you're throwing at different characters, and characters can fly by, and all these things can happen to you. In that case, again, it's learning two things really. It's learning the whole Mario Kart universe, and then learning this and developing really this whole new technology for use in a theme park ride.
You had mentioned that developing some of these projects can be 5, possibly even 10 years
Mhm.
long. That's a lifetime in terms of media technology.
Yeah,
Is there ever any danger that by the time you get to the end of developing a project, it's things have gotten ahead of you in terms of the technology evolving?
yeah, that's a good question, and it comes up all the time. Um, Fortunately, both Disney and Universal have their own R&D departments, so very often they're developing the technology themselves, and so it's ahead of anything else you can buy or get from other suppliers. Um, and we work very closely and we have partners with key technology suppliers, one of which happens to be video projectors, because we need really powerful, really bright, really crisp projectors for the work we do. Very often on the rides, we want to get you very close to that image to really immerse you in it. So, at the very last moment, we could change all the projectors. For instance, not too long ago, we changed from a conventional video projector to a laser projector, which is really incredible in terms of its crispness, and the same with 3D glasses. I remember on Transformers, we had projectors all set up for one system, which were more conventional 3D glasses you wear for when you go to a movie. At the last minute, we changed to a brand new technology that just came out. We had to switch all the projectors and switch out all the glasses that we were going to use. So yeah, that's something that's always changing uh, as we're building these attractions.
And let me speak over John's dog.
Well,
Uh,
Yeah, sorry, that's Simon.
maybe the dog has a question. Hold on, let's see.
what the dog is asking, as I'm understanding from dog, how often do you come up with something that you want the technology people to do? And how many times do they come in and say, hey, we have this new technology. Can you work it in?
The classic example I use is when I was asked to write the script for Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey, which is the key ride in the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, where you fly with Harry over Hogsmeade and Hogsfort. Um, um, I asked them they asked me to write the script. I said, "Say, what ride system do you want me to write this for?" And they said, "Well, initially, we don't want you to write it for any particular system. Just write the most incredible experience you can possibly imagine with Harry Potter." I said, "Okay." And so as you can imagine, giving that assignment, I loaded it up with, you fly up over Hogwarts Castle behind Harry, and 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 as you go over, a giant dragon attacks you in the air, and then you hurtle down over a Quidditch match, and then you're chased by dementors down into the earth, and you go to a scary place with all these dementors attacking you, and finally you escape. And I gave them the script. I said, "Okay, so here's the script. What ride system we're going to use?" They looked it over and said, "Well, uh, we realize now that what you wrote here, there is no ride system that can do all this stuff." uh, and then to Universal's credit, they said, "But what we'd like you to do is help us design a brand new ride system that will let our guests experience this." I said, "Great." So together with our very talented team of Universal engineers and creative team, and working with a very talented guy by the name of Thierry Koo there, we came up with this idea that we could use giant robotic arms and put the ride vehicle at the end of this robotic arm and move it around, and then put that whole thing on a track through the ride. And then so you'd go into the castle, and then you'd come to a window in the castle, and what the window would actually be is actually a video screen. And as you flew kind of through the window, you didn't realize it, but you were flying into a giant screen. And at that point, that whole system became a flight simulator. As you know, if you
Oh,
move
wow.
somebody the same way that the movement is happening on a giant screen, and they have no reference point, and their peripheral vision is completely filled with an image, you can create the sensation of whatever is in that media. And that's the secret behind Transformers ride, and Harry Potter, and other rides. So that's what we did. And so once you fly out that window, now you can fly up in the sky behind Harry on his broom, and have giant dragons fly up at you and blow fire in your face, and do all that. So that was a case where again, we made the technology fit what we wanted to do. And the same case for really for the Mario Kart ride. We wanted to put you in a video game, but there was really no way to throw the shells and do all those fun things that you can in Mario Kart physically. But you could do it with this augmented reality by projecting those images on your glasses.
More of Chick Russell in a moment, but first, this soothing musical inner tube. Want to ride one of Chick's rides? Then head out to Orlando. You'll find the wizarding world of Harry Potter at Universal Studios Resort.
Autobots, roll out.
Or go to Universal Studios Hollywood. That's where you'll find the Transformers 3D ride. In Chicago, the Museum of Science and Industry has Chick's U-505 U-boat exhibit. It's an historical look at how America battled Nazi submarines in World War II. Check out all of Chick's projects at chickrussell.com.
Now on with the countdown.
When you do a script, when you're writing for a ride or a theme park, and do you also storyboard? Is it that much like making a movie or a TV show?
It's very much like making a movie or TV show in the early stages. And that's what I love to do, is write these scripts. So the script is very much like a script for a movie or TV show. There's a description of what the scene is. Under that, there's the dialogue, and you go right to it. The only difference is I have to add in there things like special effects, which is pretty big. For instance, take a ride like Spider-Man, for instance, or there are physical effects like a flaming pumpkin could be thrown at you, and to make it even more compelling, to break the fourth wall, you actually feel the heat. Same in Transformers. There's, at one point, Megatron shoots a nuclear weapon at you. As it flies over the top of your head, you feel the heat because we have a big heater that blasts heat at you at exactly the right time. So that's the thing you have to add to the script when I write them. And then of course the timings are really important to these rides. It's so complicated because you don't necessarily, on the good theme park ride, you don't necessarily want to see the ride vehicle in front of you or behind you. You want to feel that you're the only one being attacked by giant robots or flying with Harry
Yes.
Potter. So there's a lot of timing about how you go into a scene. You're there usually 12 to 15 seconds, and then you have to get out so the next ride vehicle can come in. And so that has to be conveyed in the script. And the timing of the character action and their dialogue has to be such that it's also pretty quick. So that's one of the challenges of writing these kinds of scripts.
I want to say that the technology has improved greatly because I live in central Pennsylvania near
Mhm.
Hershey, and Hershey has a ride in which they take you through the making of chocolate.
Aha.
And on that particular ride, when we got into the drying where they dry the cocoa
Mhm.
beans, it was very hot,
Uh-huh.
and we realized very quickly that it was two big heating elements in the top of the little
Hmm.
drum you were in, and
Hmm.
that was the total
Yeah.
total technical expertise
Yeah.
of making it hot.
Yeah.
So to have something blow by you and feel the heat, that sounds highly technical and,
Yeah.
and a little more advanced
Yeah,
than
no,
what
it's
Hershey
really
had.
fun, and quite frankly, the technology itself is usually not very advanced itself. It's just the system, the computer system, that ties it all together to time it just right, and also the kind of what I'll call theatrical magic of hiding this stuff so you can't see it.
Right.
In your case, maybe they weren't able to do that because you're inside this vehicle, but uh, often just hiding things so people don't know where it's coming from, and the surprise of that. In Transformers, when you're being dragged through the city by one of the Decepticons, you feel the wind in your face, and those are, believe it or not, those are just rug dryers that you can't see, that are blowing wind in your face at the right time. So it's kind of fun. It's like a big magic trick when you think about it, of how all these things work, and you're kind of in this big black box, and you can just do all these fun things. So and the guests really seem to like that surprise and the visceral feeling of those things.
Let me ask you about museums. You brought that up a couple of
Yeah,
times. What do you do for museums? Is it the
yeah,
same sort of ride?
yeah. So it's kind of interesting. When I was at Disney, we actually had the ability, when certain people called Disney and they would say, "Gee, we sure would love your help because you're kind of the masters of experience and story, to help us with our museum." And very often, uh, Disney Imagineering would say, "No, we're too busy right now, and we don't really do that for people." But every now and then, for whatever reason, they would say yes, and they would let us work on something, not for very long, just enough to help with the concept. But anyway, I got to work on a couple of those kinds of projects. Also at Epcot, they have some museums for some of the World Showcase pavilions, to kind of convey more cultural information about the different countries. And so I worked on some of those. I found that I really love being able to do research and write more, and kind of help people appreciate science and technology and culture and history and those kinds of things. So when I started my own company, I decided that I would also continue doing that kind of work. And my pitch was to these museums, I would say, look, you want to bring new people to your museum. You want them to come back again over and over again. Wouldn't it be great if your exhibits were as compelling as they could be, and kind of fun, and we could use Disney storytelling and Disney show technologies to make them really cool. And some of the museum uh, people were totally uh, totally afraid that we were going to Disneyize, have Goofy running around the museum. And I said, no, that's not what I'm proposing. I'm proposing very serious type exhibits, working with your curators, working with your education department and the schools with their standards, and finding out what is the best thing you want to tell, and then finding ways to package that in a way that's fun and engaging. So particularly kids in science and history museums and technology museums have fun with this stuff and don't realizing they're kind of learning something at the same time. And so, but luckily there were many museum um, professionals who recognized this idea that I was pitching to them. And so I've had a lot of fun, designing exhibits on all kinds of things, from cattle raising to oil production, to in Saudi Arabia, a whole concept for something about how the Arabian Peninsula used to be at the bottom of a huge ocean, and that's what formed their landscape that's there now, and so so I just really enjoy doing that kind of work.
Beautiful.
Yeah, you mentioned also earlier that some of the work you do in the theme parks is very similar to a flight simulator. Do you get a chance to do any kind of something that will instruct people on how to do the jobs uh, like a flight simulator would?
Yeah. Yeah, so I had worked on another very fun project that didn't involve flight simulation, but it was a simulator nonetheless. So I was approached by the U.S. Navy. They had some ships that were sunk in the Middle East by small craft that really wasn't the way that the Navy expected to be attacked. The Navy always expected to be attacked by huge other battleships or missiles coming and hitting their big warships. So this was a case where in the Middle East, a large U.S. ship was in port, and a small kind of almost like a dinghy or a inflatable came up alongside with explosives and blew a huge hole in the side of this giant warship, and it caused massive destruction. The Navy realized, this is about 10 or 15 years ago, that their training really wasn't adequate for kind of the modern changing warfare. So they have a training facility in Chicago, north of Chicago, and they said, we want to build a missile destroyer simulator. I said, what? You want to build a missile destroyer inside of a building and turn it into a simulator? I said, yes. Okay, fine. So I worked with a great team of people, and we found a way to walk into what's essentially a sound stage, and make the whole thing look like what you see in front of you is a huge, full-scale missile destroyer in front of you. And there were a lot of tricks we used, even though it was dimensional, to make that look really realistic. In terms going so far as that you're standing on a dock, and the ship looks like it's in water, and there were sound effects of seagulls and the smell of salt water. This thing was
Wow.
pretty impressive. And so what they would do is they would take their recruits. This project is called Battle Stations 21. It's still in operation. And what they would do is, after these Navy recruits were done with their training, the last test they would take would say, okay, you've learned everything how to be a sailor now and how to be a war fighter on board a ship. We want to make sure that that you can kind of handle the stress at sea. And so they would walk aboard the ship and walk inside. Now, once they walked inside, what we had inside was a fairly complete interior of a missile destroyer. We had the bridge where you control the ship from. We had the sleeping quarters where their bunks were. We had a storage for munitions. We had a mess, which is what they call their dining hall, and all these different rooms were very authentic, right down to announcements coming over the speakers, and then we had a TV set in TV monitor in one of the rooms that appeared to be playing news reports. and they were learning that the ship was supposedly steaming to the Middle East, and that there were hostilities were breaking out. And then shortly after that, the whole ship shakes. You hear a huge explosion, and the floor vibrates, and all the alarms go off, and these guys run to their stations to handle this emergency. And so they need to go into the ammunition room, and it's being flooded, and try to move the ammunition out of there, so they have it to use, and then seal a room off so it doesn't sink the ship. They have to run somewhere else and put a fire out, and we had real fire. They have to go through a room that's completely dark and completely filled with smoke and completely destroyed, and so they have to get through there, and then they have to try to save people who have been injured. And this goes on. They have to do this for 12 hours. They go through this whole thing, and so it's a very immersive, very realistic simulator, and most of them pass, but they do find as people go through this that some really can't handle that kind of a situation, and they have to do more training, or at least these recruits know that these are the conditions they might encounter when they do go to sea, and they're better prepared for that when it happens.
Wow, amazing.
That's
Wow.
incredible.
What's fun about that is, again, it's really just basic storytelling for media in a sense. But then it also has this theatrical side that you're immersed in it. And then for Battle Stations 21, rather than it being used for pure entertainment, it's being used to really place these sailors in a very dangerous, precarious situation, so that they can, understand what these conditions will be like and be better prepared if it really happens to them.
Let me ask you one final question
Yes.
then, Chick. You started out coming out of film school at Loyola, ready to write scripts and put everything on celluloid,
Mhm.
and instead you've decided you've landed in a employment situation where you're putting everything in brick and mortar.
Mhm.
Any regrets? Any?
No, no. Luckily, I can say that I'm really happy with the way my career went. When I look around at the films being made, the TV shows being made, although they're interesting, for me, I find my work much more fun and engaging and interesting.
Great. I lied. I have one more question. What do your kids think of what you're doing?
Well, I'll tell you, I was really fortunate. I have two boys, and they were young when I was working at Disney. And so they have something called a silver pass when you're working there, which it basically gets four people in anytime, as often as you want. And so at least once a month, we would go down there, and the boys were, little at that time, and they just had the greatest time. And believe it or not, just something about human nature, they they really prefer just going out to Tom Sawyer Island and just running through the caves for a couple hours. And yeah, there's the haunted mansion and the pirates. I mean, that stuff was cool, but just to be able to go run around in some incredible environment like that, and to go on the Columbia tall-masted ship, or the Mark Twain steamboat, those kinds of things. Again, to them, they would see it on TV or see it in a movie, and then be able to go actually run around in these environments. For them, it was wonderful. And then as they got older, I switched to Universal, and their rides tend to be, as you know, more for teens and more for older, and more for adults. And so they were the right age for that when I was working there. And so they really really enjoyed being able to get a special view into those places. And I think they always thought it was fun that I was working for those companies.
That's great because when my kids were just at the tail end of high school, I think when I was working on television and I was a weatherman and I said, "Hey, you want to come down and see the green screen?" That's a technological marvel where the maps go up, but you can't. And my kids all said, "Yeah, we're gonna go out and do something else." So that's great that your kids were able to plunge themselves into that.
I think green screen is really cool.
Yeah.
So did I, but apparently you and I,
Yeah.
we weren't 16 at the time, and it, you know. So anyway, hey, well, thanks, Chick. This has been incredibly insightful and incredibly great to talk to you again after all these years.
It's been a real roller coaster. I want to thank you.
Thank you. It's been fun, you guys. You're asking great questions, and it was really fun to reminisce about some of these projects and some of these technologies. So thank you again for a great interview.
Thanks, Chick.
Thanks, Chick.
Okay, have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
You can get in touch with us by email. We're at musicalinnertube, all one word, @gmail.com.
You can follow us on Twitter at @Innertube, capitalize the M and I.
Our webpage is musicalinnertube, that's musical spelled with 2 A's, .libsyn spelled LIBSYN.com.
The Innertube is available on Amazon Music, Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts. Like us and give us a good review on any of those platforms.
And as always, thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for our theme music.